Welcome to the Weather Insights podcast. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney along with meteorologist Jeff Linder. We are recording this the morning of July 4th. Happy Independence Day, everyone. And the latest on Beryl. Beryl is currently just south of the Cayman Islands. Cayman Islands still under a hurricane warning. Beryl strength decreased now to 120 miles per hour wind speed. Now a Category 3 storm, still moving west-northwest at 20 miles per hour, expected to make landfall there on the Yucatan Peninsula, the east side of the peninsula. Friday morning, they have hurricane warnings up for the Yucatan on the east side. Then on the west side, they have tropical storm warnings as Beryl is expected to weaken to a tropical storm as it crosses the Yucatan. Also, tropical storm watch remains in effect for Belize. Beryl enters the Gulf of Mexico Saturday morning. Tracks across the Gulf is expected to regain strength to be a minimal hurricane when it makes landfall somewhere there in the cone. Right now, the center of that cone just being south of Brownsville, making landfall there at 2 a.m. on Monday morning, and then moving into the Rio Grande Valley after that, hopefully bringing some much needed rain to that area, as well as the southern hill country. So, Jeff, Beryl is now a 3. As expected, it would weaken when it gets into the part of the Caribbean it's in now. What are you seeing? What is the latest on Beryl?
Yeah, you can see the satellite. I guess we updated and moved the thing here in the last few minutes to the west, but you can see Beryl is certainly struggling. You can see there's this westerly wind shear. You can see these cloud tops peeling off here toward the north and east, and this shear is impacting the storm along with the continued quick 20-mile-an-hour forward motion. So you have shear and that forward motion, and they're counteracting each other with respect to the hurricane and resulting in weakening. And so we still have this convection or thunderstorm activity pulsing, and this pulsing nature of the thunderstorms kind of gives you an indication that some dry air is now starting to work into that inner core. And as a matter of fact, the radar data from the Caymans this morning shows the southern eyewall of this is pretty much eroded. So this inner core is starting to break down. And so far we've seen kind of gradual weakening and filling of the system. Based on what we're seeing this morning, we're probably going to start seeing a little bit more rapid weakening. And you can just tell by the cloud structure here, this is a hurricane, if you will, sort of on life support this morning. And then moving off in this direction towards the Yucatan, crossing the Yucatan, more weakening. Interestingly enough, things look decently favorable in the Gulf of Mexico for some re-strengthening. And so we'll have to see what shape this thing comes off in the Gulf of Mexico, how disrupted it is, and then how long it takes to rebuild that inner core out over the Gulf of Mexico. And this could be one of those cases where it slowly rebuilds that inner core, and then right as it comes up to the coast towards northeastern Mexico, it gets that core, and we see some more quicker deepening or rapid deepening, strengthening as it gets up right to the coast. We've seen that several times with Gulf of Mexico tropical systems in the Western Gulf. Is they take some time to build that core, and then right at the coast, we start to get some more steady or rapid strengthening. Good news is then they move inland pretty quickly.
Right.
We have not seen any significant differences on the track changes. This is good. This is held now for about the last 24 to 36 hours. So while there are still some ensemble members that come further north, and I have seen the icon has been posted all over everything that brings a big hurricane up here to the upper Texas coast.
Yeah.
That is a big outlier right now. There is nothing indicating a major hurricane threat to the upper Texas coast. The icon is not one of the best track guidance models we have. And so you can see here the ensemble means here, very consistent, good agreement. NHC, the Hurricane Center with their forecast dots right on top of the mean coming into northern Mexico or extreme southern Texas. And one thing I do want to say is from the initial start of this through the point yesterday where impacts on Jamaica, NHC absolutely has been nailing this forecast.
They have nailed it. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I'm very confident in the guidance, the mean guidance, which is their guidance right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, they have done an incredible job with this forecast. And so this is the consensus mean over the last 24 hours or so, and we've been showing this. And so you can see almost virtually no discrepancies here to the Yucatan and the Southern Gulf, and then a little bit of discrepancy or change trend, if you will, here in South Texas, northern Mexico. But still, there is no big changes. There has been no big changes with the forecast track reasoning. Possibly a little bit what we call a long track difference. So that would be the forward speed of the storm. And with the high pressure breaking down over Texas this weekend, the storm is probably going to start to slow down here in the western Gulf of Mexico, and especially once it gets inland here over southern Texas, southwestern Texas, or northern Mexico. And this is starting to become a little bit more uncertain. Some of the guidance takes this further to the north at a slower rate of speed into Texas. Other guidance kind of turns this west into Mexico. So the uncertainty is now inland. So this is not as big of a question on, where on the coast is it going to make landfall, but where does all that moisture go that comes in with this? And how does that interact with a trough that's going to be sitting over Texas as we get into next week? And you'll get into the rainfall portion of that as we go forward here.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the intensity. We're on the downward trend. I think we're really going to see some of that intensity come down today with the way Beryl's looking. Of course, here's landfall with the Yucatan, moving across the Yucatan, and then the potential here for re-strengthening in the Gulf of Mexico. You can see the guidance up here that's what I'm calling kind of hot, or doesn't show. They just show virtually no weakening over the Yucatan, and that's just really unlikely. So I'm throwing most of this out here.
Right.
But as we go forward, again, like I said, how long does it take that interquarter rebuild? And what is it looking like in the Gulf of Mexico, especially as it comes up to the coast Sunday night, Monday morning? That's when we could reach that hurricane status. Could it go a little bit higher than a minimal category 1? Could it get to a weak category 2? It's possible. There is some of the guidance that is showing that in the Western Gulf. I don't know if that necessarily changes the impacts a whole lot in deep South Texas, but if you're down there in South Texas, you need to definitely have your hurricane plans ready and be ready to enact those by tomorrow.
Yeah, so the key messages, we're down to 3. Of course, we know where it is right now, just south of the Cayman Islands, and we talked about it making landfall at Yucatan. The message there, number 3, really pertains now to Texas. Texas is mentioned there. And want to point out that with hurricanes, when they get into the Gulf Coast, we're really all affected from the Florida coastline all the way to Texas. You bring all that water in, all that energy in, and the Gulf of Mexico sort of traps everything, and that water's got to go somewhere. So that's why when these storms enter the Gulf, we're all affected by it on the Gulf Coast. We have higher tides, maybe some coastal flooding, but we also have life-threatening beach conditions all along the Gulf Coast, which is caused by riptides. And so there is definitely a riptide, rip current warnings all along the Gulf Coast. A lot of people going to the beach this weekend, so you want to be mindful of that. Rip currents are very difficult to detect, so my advice is just to stay out of the water. You can't fight a rip current. No human being can. So why even mess with it? There's plenty to do on land, plenty of sunshine, sand to enjoy. The weather shouldn't be too bad for most of us for today and tomorrow, maybe even going into Saturday. But then the conditions start to deteriorate Saturday and Sunday as Beryl gets closer. But be mindful of those rip currents and avoid them. We also have rainfall that we haven't really talked about, except in the last couple of podcasts. There's actually 3 mechanisms going on with the rainfall. You see the rainfall rates. These are 7-day rates. Southeast Texas generally getting 2 to 3 inches. Higher amounts as you expect in South Texas, 4 to 5, maybe even higher. And then even up in the hill country now, 1 to 2 inches of rain. So we have the remnants of Beryl, plenty of moisture with the remnants of Beryl. We also have, remember, 96L. Well, we haven't talked about that or shown that disturbance, but that is going to be following Beryl's path. National Hurricane Center still giving that a 20% chance of development. But I think what's more meaningful with 96L is the continued moisture it'll bring into the area. And then, Jeff, you mentioned that trough digging into North Texas. There will be a frontal boundary coming with that, which will stall. and that will start to increase rain chances on Saturdays. So Saturday, we've got the frontal boundary, and then we've got Beryl, the remnants of Beryl, and then 96L coming behind that. So we have pretty decent chance of rain, a rainy pattern starting Sunday all the way into midweek from Southeast Texas all the way down to South Texas. So that's going to be some beneficial rain. Also, the good news with that too, we've had some just, heat advisories and nasty hot temperatures. Should bring those temperatures, those high temperatures down to the low 90s, maybe even upper 80s for some areas.
Yeah, and then lastly, we wanted to hit on the tides. This is still early, and we will start to get some guidance from the National Hurricane Center as we get into Friday and Saturday. But this is just a quick look at kind of what we're looking at on the upper Texas coast for some tides. And there's really not a big difference now on the Texas coast, so we'll see how this all plays out. But some of the initial look here is higher than normal tides by a foot or so as we get into late Sunday and into early next week. And so this is on the upper Texas coast. This is below the threshold where we would have any significant issues here. So right now we're looking pretty good on the tides, but this is something we want to keep watching and check back with because we could go a little bit higher, especially looking at how the wind field responds in the Gulf. Does it expand a little bit after moving across the Yucatan? Right now, not looking at anything serious, but we definitely want to keep an eye on that. And I want to go back and say one thing about the rainfall. Depending on what happens with the remnant circulation moisture down here, does it continue more west into Mexico, or does it start to try to pull northward into the hill country? We need to watch this area real closely down here in Southwest Texas, the Rio Grande area. These totals could potentially go up quite a bit. And so there could be some significant potential for flash flooding back here in this portion of Texas as we get into early next week. So, I think this is kind of the initial estimate right now, but we could easily see these totals go up 5 or 6 or even more inches of rain here over the next couple of days. So we're just starting to get into that impact point, paying attention, keeping an eye on what's going on as we move forward down here in deep South Texas, maybe up into the mid coast and coastal Bend, and then back into the interior Rio Grande Plains.
Good point. Well, Jeff, thank you very much. Happy 4th of July to you and your family. And thank you everyone for joining us. Be sure to subscribe and share the Weather Insights YouTube channel so that you and your family can stay informed on the latest of what's going on with Beryl and the tropics. And be sure to join us on the next Weather Insights podcast.